Okay. Now it's to you.
Thank you, Dominic, and thank you, Elisa, for the invitation, and thank you to all of you for being here. I'm very happy to present in this fantastic series. You see here an air view of the Citadel of Amman, which is surrounded by the modern city, the capital Amman of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. And this is a picture that was taken in the year 2019. Underneath the modern houses lie also the remains of the Iron Age Kingdom of Ammon, on which the lecture today will focus on. Building activities have destroyed large parts of the archaeological remains already since the 1950s, and even today, unfortunately, traces of the Kingdom of Ammon disappear basically on a daily basis. The history of Amman has been well covered in terms of textual sources. However, archaeologically, there are still significant gaps, which are getting larger every year as the archaeological evidence successively disappears. So I will devote this lecture to the Corpus of Ammonite stone sculpture. These sculptures and statues are widely known, but not all of the pieces have been published or discussed in greater detail. And this is especially true with a group of statues that come from the site of Abu Alanda, which I will focus on today. So I will first of all give you an idea about the topography and the history of the Kingdom of Amman. I will show you a couple of important sites, the Citadel of Amman and its hinterland. And this serves as a sort of framework where all of these statues have to be situated in. And I will at the end give a somehow longer summary conclusion on the entire lecture. The Iron Age Kingdom of Ammon was established at the beginning of the Iron Age II period, so around 900 BCE, on the central Transjordanian plateau. You can see hopefully my cursor here. And it is bordered to the south by the Kingdom of Moab here, and in the very south, the Kingdom of Edom. The core of Ammon was the region around the capital Rabbot-Ammon, which is mainly preserved to us as the Citadel of Amman, the Jebel el-Kala. Rabbot-Ammon literally means the great one or the great city of Ammon, and this name shows the city's importance as the capital, the seat of the kingdom. The people now who inhabited the land of Ammon called themselves Bene Ammon, which is documented in various texts. It isn't very easy to pinpoint down the area where Ammonites lived and to border the territory exactly, but there are clues from the archaeological and textual evidence that allow us at least to narrow the territory down. The western border ran along the Transjordanian plateau. The Wadi Ezerga usually determines the northern border. In the east, the kingdom is bordered by the steppe, the so-called Badia, which slowly turns into a desert. And this border especially varied greatly depending on the climatic conditions. In the south, the border ran north from the site of Tel Hispan here, Tel El Umeri, Tel Jawa, and the city of Sahab. So overall, Ammon was a small kingdom with a north-south extension of about 40 to 50 kilometers and the western-eastern extension of 25 to 35 kilometers. The average elevation ranges between 800 and 1,100 meters above sea level, and the maximum elevation would be around here, which is the modern city of Asalt. A few words on the history. In the late 8th century, the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III defeated the kingdom of Ammon in the course of his western expansion, 733 and 32. And from that time onwards, Ammon, similarly to the other neighboring kingdoms, Moab and Edom, became part of the new Assyrian vassal and provincial system, which included also the Luvian Aramaic kingdoms in northern Syria, as well as the Levantine city-states to the west. So Ammon was never a province of Assyria, but remained a vassal. And being a vassal meant that Ammon paid tribute and provided troops to the new Assyrian king. After the conquest of the Babylonians, probably after the fall of Jerusalem, Ammon was incorporated into the new Babylonian provincial systems. Sources are, however, very rare about this time. Quickly on the Iron Age chronology in the southern Levant, that can be divided into 4 subphases. In today's lecture, we are primarily looking at the Iron Age 2B and mostly on the Iron Age 2C. So we are talking about a time frame of 900 to 500 BCE. So a number of excavations and also surveys started already in the 1920 on the Transjordanian Plateau, and they greatly increased then starting from the 1950s onwards. Today, around 300 sites of various sizes can be identified in the territory of Ammon that date to the Iron Age 2C. In this compilation here on the bottom left by Ray and Tyson, it can be seen that a continuous growth of settlements existed from the late Bronze Age to the Iron Age 2C, but it becomes very clear that a severe change occurred between the Iron 2B and 2C. So the settlements in the Iron 2C tripled, which is an incredible increase. Sites that can be identified in the Iron 2B, 2C are large cities with city walls, as for example the capital here, Rabbot-Ammon, or the sites Safut, Tel Umeri, Tel Jawa, or Sahab. There are also smaller villages and even singular monumental structures that are often named Rijim, such as Abu Alanda. But let's have a look at the capital, Rabbot-Ammon, first. The first excavations to investigate the Iron Age layers of Rabbot-Ammon were carried out by Rudolf Henrik Dornemann in the late 60s. Dornemann showed in his excavations that the settlement activity on the Jebel el-Kala started already in the 10th century, but he saw a very clear focus on the 7th and 6th century BCE, so late Iron Age. Rabbot-Ammon was surrounded by a city wall, which Dornemann could examine in several places, which you see here in red. The city wall ran along the natural shape of the citadel, which has, as you can see on the right-hand side, this very characteristic L shape. Within the city walls, Iron Age buildings were uncovered in 2 different places. On the lower terrace, here, on the right-hand side of the L, excavations uncovered a residence consisting here on the right-hand side of a large courtyard with adjoining rooms in the north and south. A very special room, 103, is that toilet where you can see the toilet seat here still in situ. The objects found in the debris of the rooms to the north of the courtyard comprise, besides other precious finds like incised ivories, life-size terracotta masks, hopefully soon published. The Amman glass bowl is another example, which you can see on the bottom row. And this is a very unique piece that finds only parallels in the new Assyrian residences, in particular in Nimrud. The finds date according to the excavators into the 7th century BCE, and so very strong connections to Assyria. Because of the size of this structure, as well as because of the accompanying finds, this place was interpreted as an elite residence. It has to be noted here that in the Hellenistic layer above this residence, built into a drainage channel, so in secondary context, 4 double-sided female stone heads were uncovered. You see one example here that are part of the Ammonite plastic corpus we will discuss in a couple of minutes. Just a year ago, by the way, a 5th statue of this type was found after the winter rains very close to the old excavation trenches. So we are counting 5 heads of that piece or of this type. It is very likely that these stone heads had originally belonged to the Iron Age residence I've just shown to you. Another important Iron Age II building was excavated here on the upper terrace and lies under the cellar of the Roman Hercules temple you see here on the photograph. It comprises remains of 3 massive walls, here in red, which formed the northeastern corner of a building of substantial size. Because of the size of the building and the distinctive location here close to the prominent rock and the finds, the excavator suggested that the structure should be identified as the temple of the Ammonite god Milcom. A monumental inscription found nearby, unfortunately also in secondary context, also mentions Milcom, the major deity of the Ammonite pantheon. So all of that makes it very likely that the structures I've shown to you can be indeed identified as a temple. Besides this main temple, only one other site has been identified as a sanctuary in Ammon so far, which is Rujum al-Kursi, a site that lies roughly 10 kilometers northeast of the Citadel of Amman. Unfortunately, it is built over by the headquarters of the Amman or the Jordanian Intelligence Office. This temple was dedicated to the moon god Sin, and you can see that because on either side of the entrance blocks, reliefs of a lunar crescent supported by a pillar is shown. On the basis of stylistic comparisons, Hübner dates the temple of Rujum al-Kursi to the 7th century BCE. But jumping back to the citadel for a moment, looking at the immediate vicinity here to the north of the Roman walls, the first Iron Age sculpture came to light here in 1949, just outside the city wall. So these 4 statues were discovered by a house owner when he constructed his private garage, as you can see in the photograph. And only a few years later, workers from the Amman municipality found another torso at the exact same location. These described fine circumstances give a very good idea about how most of the Ammonite statuary was discovered, which is out of the archaeological context and during modern reconstruction works. The Ammonites were buried in rock chamber tombs outside the city walls, and these burials are distributed over the entire kingdoms. You can see that, the red dots on the map. Most of these burials contained quite rich furnishings and date not before the Iron Age 2B. You can see here as an example the rich burial finds from the tomb of Adoni-Nur, containing also finds that have a clear Assyrian connection or even come from there. Because of the rich grave goods and the many documented titles on seals in the burials, we can tell that these graves belong to an elite buried at different places over the entire Ammonite territory. Now, a special feature of the Ammonite monumental architecture are the so-called rijim, which simply can be translated as tower. These rijim were spread all over the Ammonite hinterland. As you can see from the map, the dating of all of these structures is not always clear. However, many were in fact founded in the Iron Age 2B or 2C period. The main feature of the rijim are rectangular round towers, which were either integrated into other building structures or they stood completely alone. They are built in dry stone wall construction from large blocks of local stone, and you can see here, this is 1 meter the scale, so we are dealing here with blocks of a length of 2 meters in part. Whether the described shapes of these ridgem also indicate different functions is not clear. Rather, the different locations speak in favor of different uses, so either, for example, for military or agricultural purposes. A ridgem is also preserved in the modern city of Abu Alanda, number 22, which lies roughly 9 kilometers southeast of the Amman citadel. As you can see from that Google map, the small town that once lay outside of the city is now integrated into the large capital of Amman. The Department of Antiquities of Jordan carried out major excavation works in the early 70s in Abu Alanda, but these are completely unpublished. Only through the support of my Jordanian colleagues, Dr. Zelan Kafafi and Dr. Adib Abul Shmeis, we were able to in fact visit a few of these remains from Abu Alanda last year, which are still preserved. You can see the modern buildings around the ancient site everywhere, which are really surrounding the ruins. If you don't know where to look for them, you will not see them. I visited the modern city of Abu Alanda and couldn't find it in the first 2 visits I had, so I'm very grateful. The part here that is still preserved today consists of a rectangular ground plan. So we're talking about 13 to 15 meters. And you see here again that ashes of considerable sizes were built in. The ceramic finds date from the Iron Age 2 or date to the late Iron Age and the Mamluk period. And this probably also can be seen in the 2 architectural phases you can see here on these photographs. Also, a total of 10 stone sculptures was found at the site, some of which probably came from the rescue excavations of the department, but this is not at all clear. They were found as a hoard together in a hole in the ground without any further finds. And the date of deposition is unclear, and as is the original context. Thus, it is not sure whether the statues had any connection to the large building I've just shown to you. What becomes evident, however, is that there was building activity on a monumental scale, as well as the use of statuary at the site. Of these 10 heads, I could identify, study, and 3D scan 9 pieces in different storages and museums in Amman and 1 in Irbid. The location of 1 head here in black and white is unknown. To put this corpus into perspective, a total of 39 Ammonite statues in round are currently known, which comprise statues, torsos, and heads. So we are looking here on the slide on 1/4 of the entire corpus. The heads from Abu Alanda were partly presented by Ali Abu Asaf in his detailed study on the Ammonite sculpture published in 1980. In it, 5 of the 10 heads were published. In Rudolf Henry Dornemann's monograph, which came out in 1983, the second largest study on this topic, the statues from Abu Alanda do not appear at all. One of the heads was moreover discussed in 2 articles. Here, however, the focus was on the representation of Ammonite deities in general. So this overview shows that only half of the sculptures from Abu Alanda have been, in fact, known so far. The pieces of Abu Alanda are of great importance for the entire corpus because, first, it is the largest group of images that was found together. Second, among these heads, different groups of persons can be identified. And third, there are 2 pairs of almost identical statues, which is also unique. So let's have a look at the heads in detail together. In total, there are 9 anthropomorphic heads and 1 animal body here. The animal can be identified as a lion and is the only of its kind from Ammon. Some of the statues, as you can see, are poorly preserved. The faces are partly broken off or are heavily eroded at that piece. And other ones, like that head here, I hope you can see my cursor, by the way, is very well preserved. All of the pieces are made of yellowish white limestone, which is partly weathered to this light brown. The limestone is local and has outcrops around Amman, and this was confirmed by local Jordanian geologists, and we're currently also undertaking chemical analysis, ICP-MS, on a couple of samples we got from the pieces. 4 of the heads come in 2 pairs, which are these 2 on the top left here and on the bottom right, which is unique among the entire Ammonite corpus. These 3 redly framed heads are life-size, and these green framed heads, the 4, are slightly below life-size. The rest of the heads must have belonged to smaller statues. I'm talking about 40 to 50 centimeters of height. In general, around 1/4 of the entire corpus of Ammonite sculpture is in fact life-size. And here on the right-hand side, you see 1 monumental statue that occurs, the so-called theater statue. The name comes from the site, from the Roman theater, where it was found in secondary context. So this statue here is 2 meters high and weighs about 2 tons. These 6 heads here have exceptionally long necks, some of which are broken. These necks possibly served as pegs for setting the heads into the corresponding bodies, which could have been made of different materials. 1 stone torso, here on the top right, among the Ammonite corpus has a round depression here at the neck area and certainly served as a composite part for an entire statue. The statues of Abu Alanda carry no inscription. They were also not found within a closed archaeological context, as we have seen. Therefore, the identification, function, and chronological attribution can only be achieved on the basis of comparisons. In this presentation now, I will foremost focus on comparisons with the Ammonite corpus. These 1, 2, 3, 4 heads from Abu Alanda can be grouped together because of their short and curly hairstyle. The 2 life-size male heads here have an identical hairstyle with regular curls of 3 strands, which circular curled ends. The top right head, on the other hand, is formed by irregularly arranged individual strands, which are curled at the ends. This entire hairstyle here of that guy looks a bit like a cap that was placed on a head. And this can also be observed among this head here on the bottom right, even though we can't really see the hairstyle anymore. Short curly hairstyle is characteristic for male depictions in Abu Alanda and can also be observed among a few other Ammonite statues, which can for sure, as this one, be identified as male. So in contrast, hair of female are long and stranded. How males were depicted becomes also clear by contrasting them with the images of rulers. The way an Ammonite king was depicted is illustrated by this sculpture, which bears an inscription and thus serves as a key object for iconographic interpretation and dating. The king depicted here is Yerach-Azar, son of Zakur, son of Shaneb, as we can read from here. So neither Zakur nor Shaneb, neither a Yerach Azza nor a Sakur is attested in the Ammonite onomasticon, but an Ammonite ruler named Stanipu is mentioned on a cuneiform tablet dating to the time of Tiglath-Pileser III. So Yerach Azza can thus be identified as the grandson of Stanipu and must have reigned somewhere in the 690s BCE. So based now on this verified representation of a king, it is possible to identify attributes and modes of representation that are typical for Ammonite rulers. Yerach Azza, as well as our monumental theater statue, wear a diadem. You can see that here and also here. According to Ursula Magen and Mirko Novak, among others, the diadem marks kings and princes as well as persons of high rank, both in Mesopotamia and the Levant. Another attribute is the lotus, which is originally an Egyptian motif, but has been known as a divine symbol in Levantine iconography since at least the late Bronze Ages. You can see 3 examples from Ammon wearing the lotus in front of the chest. This motif is also prominently represented on the Ahiram sarcophagus. You see the lid here and the 2 lotuses that are depicted. And the lotus is also popular among Luvian Aramaic kings holding it, and also the new Assyrian rulers make use of this motif. So the connection between kings and lotus is well established in the region. Due to the absence of a diadem, it is likely that the heads from Abu Alanda do not depict rulers. Another interesting detail here is that the absence of beards, which also support the identification as male persons but not as kings, because in the entire Ammonite corpus, depictions with diadem and lotus usually also have beards. This head stands out within the Alanda plastic corpus for its headgear. The central part of it here can best be described with the shape of a 9-pin or token that has this volute-like side parts attached to it. This is the only headdress we know within the Ammonite corpus. It appears on a total of 12 sculptures, and there are also terracotta figurines that are decorated with it. And you can see here a selection of examples. The headgear can be identified as an Artif crown originating from Egypt. In Egyptian iconography, the Artif crown appears on representations of Osiris as the white crown of Upper Egypt. During the early late Bronze Ages, the Artif crown found its way into the Levant, appearing on statues, figurines, and reliefs. In Iron Age Transjordan, the Artif crown then left behind any association specific to Osiris and only signals divine power in general. Most of the researchers believe that the deity depicted with this type of crown was the chief god of the Ammonite pantheon, while Abu Asaf and others suggest that to be Milcom. Others, like Damio and Dion, believe El was the main god. We don't have any depiction of a statue with Artif crown, unfortunately. You see here some examples of the Artif crown. The comparisons show that the shapes, proportion, and sizes of the central and side parts vary in relation to each other. And because of that, Davion and Dion identified 3 styles of crowns. Group 1 here on the left is close in shape to the Egyptian Osiris crown with this rounded knob on the top. Group 2 has a flattened knob in the shape of a disc. And group 3 on the right is broad, or the cap is broad across the top and taking the form of an arch. The authors now ascribe a chronological development for the different shapes and suggested that the taller crowns with the knob at the top, so group 1, were earlier since they more resemble the Egyptian original. The shorter broad crown would then be later since they would have lost the resemblance to the Egyptian predecessor, so that would be group 3. Even though the chronological anchor for an absolute dating here is missing, the head from Abu Alanda would fall into rather the first group. There remains a group of 3 heads from Abu Alanda, which are to be considered as female. This piece here on the top left is badly damaged, and only on one side these 3 strands are preserved and are partly even broken off. Based on comparisons with other Ammonite images, this fragment could be verified possibly as part of the side curls of a head belonging to the type of the double-sided female heads. So it could possibly be identified here as the side locks. Characteristic for these double-sided female heads is the parted hair, which curves behind the ears alongside the face, and each lock here ends in a curl that is only depicted here by incisions. The other 2 heads are distinctive for their overall column shape. The ears are sculptured on both sides. The hairstyle is merely indicated by carved strands. The back and top of both of the pieces is not shaped, but only slightly smoothed. Unfortunately, the faces are very poorly preserved. You can see possibly the eyes here and possibly parts of the noses here. The 2 strands are looped behind the ear and end both on the chest. The strands of this figure here is even divided into 2 parts. It cannot be decided here whether the ends were curled and rolled up, as we've seen that on the double-sided female head examples. The hair here on the other side tapers to a point on the chest and is a bit different than the left-hand side figure. In spite of these small differences, the long strand reaching down to the chest and also the subdivision into 2 strands of hair resemble the hairstyle of the double-sided female heads, even if the characteristic earrings they have here and also the necklace is missing on the pieces from Abu Alanda. An interesting feature, by the way, of the sculpture are these round holes at the bottom and also at the top of the head. This led Abu Alanda and others to interpret these heads as capitals, so part of the architecture. Iconographically, the closest parallels for these heads come from Ammon itself, and we are looking here at these 3 fragments of terracotta molds that were found in very rich tombs around the citadel. These one come from tomb F, which was dated by Dornemann in the 7th-6th century. You see here again the parted hair, the locks at the end. Here you see the earrings and also the characteristic necklace. The double-sided female head type can also be found on ivories of the woman at the window type. If one follows the classification of Hermann and Laidlaw, who put the ivories of this type into a Phoenician, a Syrian, and North Syrian group, the Ammonite heads resemble most closely the Phoenician type with regards to their hairdress. The earrings and necklace find parallels among the North Syrian here, the earrings, and the Syrian type. The examples on these ivories also show how these heads could have been fitted into the architecture. So here they occur on top of a balustrade as part of the architectural setting. One of the most important, but at the same time most difficult questions is the stylistic classification of the Abu Alanda heads. Because of the poor preservation, there are in fact only couple of features that can be used for comparison, which are the construction of the ears, the shape of the head, the relative position of eyes and nose and mouth, and as well as the overall modeling. Let's take a look at the ears first. So on the left-hand side, the ear of the god is very stylized compared to the other statues. The helix here is rounded and the tragus is very prominently knob-like. The two life-size heads here, and there's one example only on the slide, have a more true-to-life style helix with a very prominent jagged inner line. This could also be the case with the ears of these two heads. On the right-hand side, here the inner line is not really preserved, but the overall shape of the ear is similarly natural done to head 2. So overall, the ears come in more or less two different shapes, one very abstract one of the god and the other one which is more closer to human morphology. Also, the overall shape of the head and facial proportions vary. The two life-size male heads here are true to lifestyle, position of the eyes and their distance from each other, and also in relation to mouth and nose is quite natural. The shape of the head is oval. Okay, that's probably not directed to me. This second head here shares, the second and the third head here share an oval shape as well, but the facial proportion do not really correspond to human morphology. So here the eyes sit a bit too low and the hairline is a bit too far up. The head of the god is completely unnatural as the rounded cheeks quite strongly protrude outwards. So the heads from Abu Alanda show a high degree of modeling. In contrast, for example, the head of the entire statue of King Yerach-Azza. The hair of the king as well as the garment is not modeled but represented by incisions. And also the facial features are less finely sculpted. The stylistic comparisons of the head of Abu Alanda shows a tendency. The head of God stands out from the rest of the sculptures by the more abstract representation of the ear and the peculiar shape of the head. The other pieces are more consistent in terms of head shape and proportions. However, differences can be made out in the depictions of the curls we've seen earlier and possibly also the ears. Common to all of these heads from Abu Alanda is the quite high degree of plasticity. Due to the stylistic differences of the god and the classification of Dion and Davion of the Artif crown as early, I'm tempted carefully to rank the gods as the earliest object of the Abu Alanda corpus. The fact that the statues were found in a hoard makes it likely that the pieces were in use at the same time before they were dismantled together. The time of production may, of course, however, vary from that. On the other hand, these two almost identical pairs here were certainly made at the same time. In terms of function, these pairs suggest that they were made for a specific location and were probably meant to flank something, possibly an entrance, possibly an altar. The image of the god indicates a use within a cultic context. The statues of humans could be conceivable in the framework of funerary monuments. The female heads could have been used as an architectural part in an elite residence following the double-faced female heads from the Amman Citadel. But these are, of course, only suggestions. Let's sum up. In spite of the difficult find circumstances, there is an enormous informative value in the Ammonite statues, as can be gleaned from the corpus from Abu Alanda. The 10 heads form the largest group of Ammonite statues that were found together and have to be set in the context of 39 Ammonite sculptures in total. Because the Abu Alanda statues were found together in a hoard, it can be assumed that they were in use at the same time before they were buried together. The two almost identical pairs make their simultaneous use in a specific context likely. The statues from Abu Alanda can be identified as male persons, god, female figures, and animal on basis of comparison. This means that the corpus of Abu Alanda shows almost the full spectrum of persons apart from kings. Iconographically, the Alanda group can well be connected to the rest of the statuaries from Ammon. This is most evident in the Artif crown, which appears throughout the Ammonite corpus as the crown of the gods. Stylistically, the figures from Alanda differ in part. The god deviates in the representation thereby strongly from the rest of the heads, which show otherwise less strong stylistic differences, as for example, the design of the hair and also the ears. A different chronological deviation of the god and the rest of the corpus seems possible. The overall plasticity of the corpus binds the statues, however, together. Ammonite statues were not only uncovered from the immediate vicinity of the capital Rabbot-Ammon, with its palace and the main temple, but were also found in other places of Ammon, such as Abu Alanda we've seen, Khirbel el-Hajja would be another site, or Arjan. The distribution of the statues coincides with the dense occurrence of rich burials that show connections to Assyria, as well as with the distribution of fortified cities, monumental regime, and the temple Rujum al-Kursi. This overlap shows that monumental architecture and sculpture occur not only in the capital, but also in the hinterland. This wide and dense gathering of monumentality in a relatively small area could be an indication of a less centralized organization, even if the royal center with its vassal ties to Assyria existed, of course. A possible model for this decentralized distribution pattern could be, for example, a tribal-based social structure with multiple centers. I hope that I could give you an insight into this absolutely fascinating corpus of sculptures. I'm thanking you for your attention, thanking everybody who helped me out, and I'm looking forward to your comments and questions either here or via email. Thank you very much.